Welcome back to the dark side of Reddit, stories that will haunt your thoughts. Today we have a question that was asked on Reddit, and it is, Reddit, what is your most disturbing, scary, or creepy real story? Serious. 1. I was 17 and had just gotten my license. Back in high school, my friends and I had made it a mission to find abandoned houses to throw parties in. We had a few good candidates, but the motherlode was this house I would pass on my home from work. It was an undeveloped shell of a huge home with a large property in the back. I had told one of my friends about it, and one day before we went to see a movie, I took him to the house. It was about dusk in summer, so I had my headlights on. I pulled into the front of the house and we were there for like 10 seconds tops before we pulled back to go to the main road. A minute later, this big truck pulls up behind us with its high beams on and riding our ass. My friend and I took note of it, but paid it no mind as we headed back to the main road. At the light, I turned right, but the truck cut through the gas station at the corner and blocked us off. Out of the truck comes this big hulk of a man, and my friend and I are shitting our pants. He raps on the window and I roll it down. Now, the really freaky part is that this is a busy road and now there was no one in sight. He asks us what we were doing at the house and I quickly lead in said we were making a U-turn. He stares at us for a few seconds, smiles, and sends us on our way. To this day, the house remains unfinished and I'm convinced it's a drug operation of some sort. TL, doctor, don't go into abandoned houses, man. 2. A few years ago, I was walking through the woods, off the beaten track, a bit, and I smelt this really overpowering sweet smell. Being nosy, I pulled back the undergrowth to have a look and found a dead body. The guy had clearly been there a while and wasn't looking great, all swollen and green and black with various runny bits. The local wildlife had also been dining well for a few days. I called the police, who told me to wait with the body until they arrived. Being in the middle of nowhere, it took a while for them to arrive and it got dark and I was just sat there in the dark with him for a long time. It turned out he had committed suicide. For a long time afterwards, I had dreams about him and he would talk to me, and not nice things, mainly about how he was angry. I had disturbed his resting place and he wanted me to kill myself. Probably just my imagination, but all pretty disturbing at the time. He still turns up in my dreams from time to time, and no doubt will be tonight after typing this. 3. I lived in a bizarre little house as a child. It was incredibly tall and thin, like an attached house except freestanding, with 3 floors, a basement and an attic. It was full of quirks, such as two fully functional fireplaces, a shower stall in the center of the basement, a backyard so small that you could not take 5 paces without hitting the fence, and an old-timey rope-pull dumbwaiter that led from the kitchen to my bedroom. I loved that weird little place, but unfortunately it was incredibly old, and half of its charm was the fact that it seemed to have been designed by an inarticulate conclave of lunatics, and eventually the repair costs exceeded what my parents were willing to sink into it, and we had to move. Preparing for the move was a chore. I packed most of my stuff myself, and I had taken to throwing stuff down the dumbwaiter and shoving all my clothes so thickly in my closet that they became a single solid brick of fabric. While clearing that closet out, in fact, I came across a feature I hadn't noticed before, an attic entrance in the roof. Being an adventurous kid, I opened her up, stood on the closed brick, and began my first and last exploration into the topmost part of our weird little house. The first thing I noticed was that it wasn't as dark as it should have been. The place was strung with old, red Christmas lights which still burned with leftover incandescence, and a dozen little cracks and holes peeped down into all the bedrooms below. The second thing I noticed was that the place was set up for habitation. The insulation was plasticked away. There was an old gurney piled with sleeping bags and sheets, and a rusted mint green refrigerator which still worked when I tested it. The third thing was the bones. There were a lot of bones. I was a kid at the time, with a limited understanding of anatomy, but there were bones of all types heaped into a series of piles around the center of the attic, small and large, clean and white, from every and any imaginable sort of creature, haphazardly stacked in a half-dozen osseous clumps. 2 of them were blackened, as if someone had tried to burn them, and the walls nearest those blackened piles were scrawled in dark, bone-char messages. Mostly they were just smears, but the word sorry appeared more than once. That room had been sitting over my head for 8 years, while I slept. For a few summers ago, I went for a bike ride around midnight with a friend. We went our separate ways at the end of the evening, and I had about 2 blocks to ride back by myself. Because of construction, I had to ride on the sidewalk, but the streets were dead, but it wasn't a problem until right where I was about to turn left onto my street. There was this man walking by himself, maybe 40s. A little scruffy but not homeless. The sidewalk was narrow and I didn't want to freak him out, so when I got about 6 feet behind him, I said, "Hey, behind you." And he turned around and gave me this super angry look. I turned down my street and he started to follow me, literally screaming about how I was a fucking cunt and he was going to kill me and all that. I live right off the corner and I didn't want him to figure that out, so I decided to do another loop around the block. That's not the scary part. The scary part is that when I looped back around and looked down the street, I saw him standing on my fucking front stoop, staring out at the street like the motherfucker knew I lived there. He saw me ride by again, but he didn't say anything. I ended up going back to the friends, but my bike got stolen from the alleyway by the house 2 days later. Edit. The guy in question was definitely not actually homeless. We have a large population of mentally ill in that area, unfortunately, downtown of a medium-sized city. So if I didn't think the sidewalk was too narrow to pass otherwise, I wouldn't have disturbed him. Half the scary part was that he looked pretty much completely normal for my area. That being said, I ended up texting my mom, and she made the decision not to notify law enforcement until my bike was stolen. 5. A week after gaining my CPR certification, I had to try and perform CPR on a woman dying of the heroin, probably other drugs, to overdose. I was at a thrift store with some friends looking for Halloween costumes, and someone came in saying that someone was passed out in the parking lot. I was in the dressing room, and it just got super quiet. So I came out and told them I was certified and I'd go take a look and that they needed to call 911. I go outside and don't see anyone on the ground. Someone comes out and shouts that the person is in the car that's parked far out by itself. I ran over and honestly freaked the fuck out. She was pretty much already dead, completely blue in the face, slumped against her car window. She had the red druggy rings around her eyes, but those were blue too because she was so oxygen deprived. We opened the door and I'll never forget that when we turned her head to see if she still had a pulse, she had tears running down her face. We pulled her out of the car, put her on the ground, and took her pulse again because the first person to do it wasn't sure. We started CPR and the ambulance arrived about a minute after. They got her strapped up and in and continued CPR. They had another ambulance come and those EMTs got out and there was literally like 6 of them surrounding her. The cop told us they had administered some type of drug that can apparently reverse heroin overdoses if given in time. But she was pretty much dead already. They would do the necessary stuff until they could get to the hospital and call it. According to him, I also remember when we opened the door there was heroin needles and empty pill bottles all over the floor. She wasn't very old. We also think she had kids. She had some toys and a car seat, plus 2 names tattooed on her. Edit. Wow. Thank you guys so much for the responses and the gold. It was definitely a rough situation, but for being 19 at the time, I think I handled it well. Till the next mystery. See you soon. Don't forget to like and subscribe.